Something is broken inside Rick Ross camp tonight, and everybody in the room can smell it. The numbers came back. The numbers were catastrophic. And before the ink even dried on the first week report, 50 Cent had already turned Rick Ross' entire comeback into a punchline the internet is going to be quoting for the next 10 years. This is not a rap beef anymore. This is a public autopsy. And 50 Cent is holding the scalpel with a grin so wide you can see it through the screen. Every hour that passes, another screenshot goes up. Every screenshot that goes up, another piece of the Rick Ross empire quietly falls off the wall. Rick Ross was supposed to walk back into the arena as a giant. Instead, he walked into a trapdoor. The album everyone in his camp swore would silence the doubters, the project Rick Ross himself was calling Album of the Year, the record he was hyping in every studio, every podcast, every green room from Miami to Manhattan, landed with a thud so quiet it might as well have never existed. Under 26,000 units in the first week. Sub 10,000 pure sales in physical stores by some counts. Streaming numbers so weak that a single Drake loosie reportedly outperformed the entire Rick Ross project in the same window. And the second those figures went public, 50 Cent stopped whatever he was doing and went to work. No warm-up. No hesitation. No mercy. Because that is what 50 Cent does. When the smell of a bad week starts drifting out of another artist's camp, 50 Cent is the first predator at the scene. And when that artist is Rick Ross, the man 50 Cent has been circling for the better part of 2 decades, the response was not a post. It was a campaign. A full, orchestrated, minute-by-minute demolition run on Instagram that turned Rick Ross comeback week into the loudest Rick Ross humiliation the culture has seen since the beef first broke open in 2009. Nobody has recovered from a 50 Cent internet siege on this scale. Nobody. And Rick Ross is now inside one whether he wanted the war or not. Rewind the tape. Rewind all the way to the run-up. Rick Ross had been telling anybody with a microphone that this album was different. On podcasts, he was cool, calm, and dripping with that trademark boss tone. He was talking about being paid before the album dropped. He was talking about the industry changing, but Rick Ross not needing to change with it. He was telling every host in every chair that set in stone was etched, a word he leaned on so hard it started to feel like prophecy. And the fans ran with it. Comment sections lit up. Blogs teased snippets. His team pushed the rollout through every legacy channel they still control. For a stretch, Rick Ross looked like a man about to remind the game exactly why Maybach music was once a household name. Then the numbers hit, and the room went quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before the phones start ringing and nobody wants to be the one to pick up. Because a Rick Ross debuting somewhere under the 26,000 mark is not a streaming era readjustment. That is not a "the industry has evolved" story. That is a 5-alarm signal that something at the very center of Rick Ross' commercial engine has stopped firing. And it stopped firing on the exact release week Rick Ross had been publicly betting everything on. Now compare that to what Rick Ross used to do. God forgives, I don't in 2012 over 200,000 units in the first week. Hood Billionaire in 2014, a Billboard 200 #1 debut. Teflon Don, Trilla, Deeper Than Rap, every one of them planted a Rick Ross flag in a chart position that told the industry he was untouchable. A Rick Ross first week used to be a coronation. This one was a coroner's report. And the entire music industry felt the difference in their bones the moment the figures hit the trackers. Enter 50 Cent. Because if you have been paying attention to 50 Cent for even 5 minutes over the last 15 years, you already know what happens next. 50 Cent does not miss a window. 50 Cent does not wait a week to see if the story cools. 50 Cent looks at a Rick Ross first week number the same way a shark looks at a diver bleeding into open water. Within hours, some inside the industry are saying within minutes, 50 Cent was already on Instagram framing the entire set in stone rollout as one of the most embarrassing comeback attempts modern rap has ever tried to sell to the public. He did not write essays. He did not do interviews. He did not need to. 50 Cent posted a clean screenshot of the numbers. Captioned it with the kind of one-line kill shot that ricochets across every group chat in the country in under an hour. Zoomed in on the projection. Zoomed in on the streaming figures. zoomed in on the pure sales gap. And then, because 50 Cent is not just petty, he is architectural about his pettiness, he started stacking follow-ups like a man laying bricks on a wall Rick Ross was going to have to look at every single morning for the next month. The chicken wing joke came first. 50 Cent joked that Rick Ross was going to have to promote car shows and slang chicken wings just to keep the lights on at the promised land. On paper, that sounds like a light shot. In practice, because Rick Ross' Wingstop empire is one of the most publicized pieces of his brand, it landed like a haymaker. It told Rick Ross' audience, and more importantly, told the rest of hip-hop, that 50 Cent was not just clowning the album. 50 Cent was clowning the entire Rick Ross business model. The car shows, the Wingstops, the rented mansions, the whole Big Boss Theater. Every prop Rick Ross had ever used to project untouchable wealth was suddenly a punchline in a 50 Cent caption. And the internet went feral. Because this is where the machinery of a 50 Cent siege actually starts to bite. It is never one post. It is a chain. A screenshot at 9 a.m. A meme at 11. A repost of a fan comment at noon. A fresh mock caption before dinner. A tagged screenshot of an interview from 6 years ago where Rick Ross had bragged about numbers he no longer touches. By nightfall, the story on every hip-hop platform in the country had shifted. It was not Rick Ross drops new album. It was 50 Cent buried Rick Ross today. That is not a rap beef anymore. That is 50 Cent using his phone as a scalpel and Rick Ross first week as the operating table. So which post landed hardest? Which caption cut deepest? Ask 10 different people and you will get 10 different answers, but the one that keeps circulating, the one that industry insiders keep sending each other, is the caption where 50 Cent basically dared Rick Ross to explain, in his own words, how a man who has been telling the world for 2 decades that he is the biggest boss in the room could not clear 26,000 units on a comeback record with a full label push behind him. There is no answer to that question. Not one Rick Ross could give in public. Not one that would not make things worse. And 50 Cent knew that when he posted it. And this is the part nobody is saying out loud. 50 Cent is not doing this because 50 Cent hates Rick Ross. He might. But that is not the engine. 50 Cent is doing this because 50 Cent understands attention better than almost any other figure of his generation in this industry. He understands that in the streaming era, chart position is not the trophy is the news cycle. And every single hour that Rick Ross' name is trending in association with the word flop, 50 Cent's brand grows. His show gets more eyeballs. His liquor moves more units. His investors get more excited. Rick Ross' worst week is 50 Cent's best week. That is not an accident. That is the entire business plan. But peel back one more layer and the whole picture shifts. Because this beef between 50 Cent and Rick Ross did not start last week. It started in January of 2009 when a track called Mafia Music leaked with Rick Ross taking direct aim at 50 Cent on wax. And 50 Cent, being 50 Cent, did not respond with a song. He responded with a war plan. He dug into Rick Ross' background. He resurfaced the correctional officer photograph. He put a magnifying glass on Rick Ross' authenticity in a genre where authenticity is the entire currency. And from that moment forward, the two of them have been locked in one of the longest personal feuds in modern rap history. It has never really ended. It has only ever gone quiet between rounds. And every time the industry thinks it has finally cooled off, one of them gives the other a fresh reason to reload. Set in stone was that reason. And this time the ammunition was Rick Ross' own numbers. You have to understand what a first-week number of that size means for an artist of Rick Ross' altitude. This is not a rookie stumbling. This is not an independent artist finding their audience. This is a major label veteran with a full team, a full budget, a full press cycle, and decades of catalog goodwill behind him, and the market said no. Loudly. In every metric that counts. The streams underdelivered. The pure sales underdelivered. The physical retail movement underdelivered. And every one of those data points is now a screenshot in 50 Cent's Instagram carousel. Rosie stayed quiet. That is the part nobody expected. Because if there is one thing Rick Ross has never been shy about, it is clapping back. He has clapped back on wax. He has clapped back in interviews. He has clapped back on podcasts sitting next to Fat Joe and Jada Kiss with $1 million ring on his finger, threatening to swing it into 50 Cent's face on camera. Rick Ross does not do silence. Rick Ross does not do restraint. So when the silence came this time, real silence, no diss track, no clapback interview, no aggressive Instagram live, the industry started reading tea leaves. Some in Ross camp are calling it discipline. Wisdom. A man choosing not to feed the beast. And there is truth in that reading. Engaging 50 Cent in a social media war is one of the most well-documented losing propositions in modern celebrity culture. Every artist who has stepped into that ring with 50 Cent has come out worse than they went in. 50 Cent has been drilling this style of psychological warfare longer than most of his opponents have been famous. Rick Ross knows this. His team knows this. And there is a real argument that the smartest play right now is to let the storm pass without giving 50 Cent one more piece of ammunition to remix. But the other reading is uglier. And it is the reading you are seeing in every industry group chat right now. That Rick Ross is not silent because he is disciplined. Rick Ross is silent because there is no clean answer. The numbers are the numbers. The streams are the streams. You cannot argue with a chart. You cannot spin a first-week figure that is public knowledge inside 24 hours. Every response Rick Ross could give would only extend the news cycle 50 Cent is currently running against him. And 50 Cent knows that too. That is why every hour Rick Ross stays quiet, 50 Cent posts again. Whichever theory you land on, the silence is doing its own damage. Because in the vacuum, 50 Cent's framing has become the default framing. When 50 Cent posts a screenshot with a caption, that caption becomes the headline. When 50 Cent turns Rick Ross Wingstop into a punchline, that punchline becomes the meme. When 50 Cent reposts a fan clowning Rick Ross rented cars and rented mansions, that repost becomes the takeaway. Rick Ross is not just losing the news cycle. Rick Ross is watching another man author the first draft of Rick Ross' own decline in real time. And once that draft goes to print inside enough group chats, no clapback in the world unwrites it. And it is not just 50 Cent piling on. That is what makes this one hit different. The old Rick Ross could count on the culture to catch him. Peers stepped up. Blogs softened the blow. Big features hit at the right time. This week the culture watched and said nothing. No mainstream artist rushed to co-sign the album. No major league rapper flooded their story with the artwork. There was no wave of "go stream the boss" energy from the artists Rick Ross has historically leaned on. There was a quiet. A different kind of quiet than his own. A cold one. And in a business where warmth from your peers is worth more than radio spins, the temperature said everything. Now loop that thread back to what 50 Cent understood the moment he saw the projection. He understood that Rick Ross was standing in a room where the walls had already stopped listening. So 50 Cent did not need to wait. He did not need to build a case. He walked in and started swinging while the crowd was already backing up. That is not just petty. That is battle-tested media instinct. And this is what makes 50 Cent, whether you like him or not, one of the most dangerous voices in modern hip-hop culture. He does not create the moment. He identifies the moment before anyone else in the room, and then he makes sure his version of the story is the one that survives. Every other artist tells a story after it happens. 50 Cent tells you the story while it is still happening, and by the time everyone else catches up, his version is the only one on the record. For a sharper read on how deep this cuts, look at what happened to the album on radio. Hot 97 in New York played the full record on release day. On paper, that should have been a moment. In practice, that spin, coming in the middle of an eroding first-week story, became a symbol of a promotional apparatus that could not fire loud enough to matter anymore. Radio spin without cultural pickup is just noise. And that is exactly what this week sounded like. Noise. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's Instagram was pulling more genuine conversation about Set in Stone than the album itself. A Rick Ross release generated more organic discussion in 50 Cent's comment section than in Rick Ross' own. Read that sentence twice. That is the sentence Rick Ross' PR team is trying not to think about tonight. And then, layered under all of it, is the biggest question none of the involved parties want asked in public. Is this actually a Rick Ross problem, or is this a legacy rap problem? Because if a man with Rick Ross catalog, Rick Ross recognizability, Rick Ross machine, and Rick Ross 20 years of goodwill cannot crack a real number on a comeback week, what does that say about every other veteran artist from the same lane? What does it say about how the streaming era rewards persona? What does it say about the ceiling on the mid-2000s rap generation as an entire commercial class? These are the questions the industry does not want on the table. But 50 Cent's siege put them on the table, and now the whole business has to sit at it. Rick Ross became the test case for a generation-wide fear, and the test case failed on live television. That is the part that makes this week so heavy for Rick Ross. It is not just a bad opening. It is a data point in a story about an entire generation of rappers being forced to admit that the game changed while they were still standing on the old stage. The Drake features that used to guarantee streams did not appear. The playlists that used to catch a veteran album did not catch this one. The algorithm, the same algorithm Rick Ross used to be able to bulldoze with sheer name recognition, did not care. And the algorithm not caring is, in 2026, the truest verdict there is. Chart positions can be spun. Reviews can be argued with. But an algorithm that quietly declines to boost your record is a jury that never speaks and never lies. Rewind to how Rick Ross talked about the album in the run-up, and the pain sharpens further. He told hosts he was grateful and thankful and beyond blessed for 2 decades in the game. He told them the album was getting bigger, that he needed a bigger date, that he had been inspired by Jay-Z's Stadium Run. He talked about being paid before the album drops, about being a boss who does not have to hustle the numbers the way podcast rappers do. Every one of those sound bites now plays like foreshadowing. Every quote is a screenshot waiting to be reposted next to the first week figure. And 50 Cent has already started doing exactly that. The man is not making up material. Rick Ross is writing the diss campaign for him one interview at a time. Which is why the Wingstop bit hit so hard. It was not just a joke about chicken. It was 50 Cent taking Rick Ross' proudest business flex, the Wing Empire, the LLC receipts, the I get mine outside the music pitch, and turning it into a survival plan. As in, without the music, this is what is left. That is not comedy. That is a public rewrite of Rick Ross' entire economic identity. And Rick Ross' audience heard it exactly the way 50 Cent designed them to hear it. The Wingstop was never the punchline. Rick Ross was the punchline. Wingstop was just the delivery vehicle. The escalation ladder from there is where this story stops being funny for anyone in Rick Ross camp. Because 50 Cent has hinted, and 50 Cent's hints are never accidents, that there is more coming. More screenshots. More comparisons. More resurfaced Rick Ross quotes from the podcast circuit put next to the sales figure like courtroom exhibits. 50 Cent has built a career out of exactly this rhythm. He does not empty the clip in one post. He paces the assault. He gives the internet a fresh laugh every 24 hours. He extends the news cycle by leaking one more shot every time the last one starts to cool. And Rick Ross' team, right now, has no counter for it that would not accelerate the very thing they are trying to slow down. Every option Rick Ross has to end this cycle also feeds it. That is the trap 50 Cent designed. Compare 50 Cent's playbook to what almost every other artist tries when they get dragged. Most rappers respond too fast. Some respond too angry. Some respond with a diss track that only adds fuel to the fire. Some respond with a legal threat that becomes its own headline. 50 Cent has drilled a doctrine into an entire generation of hip-hop that responding to 50 Cent is losing to 50 Cent. And Rick Ross, for all his faults, has been in this game long enough to know that. Which is why the silence, even if it is the right move, cannot save the weak. Because at this altitude, silence does not stop the story. Silence just changes who tells it. And right now the storyteller is not Rick Ross. And the person telling it right now, at every hour of every day, is 50 Cent. Look at the receipts on the beef itself, and you can see why 50 Cent moves like this. The Curtis vs. Rose saga has never really been about music. It became about business, about credibility, about street ledger, about who lied about what, about a correctional officer photograph 50 Cent surfaced in an era before Google was easy, about lawsuits and countersuits, about mothers being invoked and children being brought into songs, about a level of personal warfare that most modern rap beefs never even try to touch. Both of these men have said things about each other that no truce could ever undo. And every time the industry declares the beef dead, one of them proves it was only ever sleeping. There is a reason the older heads in the industry never bought the "it is over" narrative. They knew this fire had roots. The strange thing is how much respect 50 Cent has drawn from unexpected corners this week. Not respect for Rick Ross. Respect for 50 Cent's ability to still, in 2026, weaponize a Rick Ross release week the way he used to weaponize a Ja Rule interview back in 2003. 2 decades in, and 50 Cent still has the sharpest press instinct of anyone in his generation. His timing is inhuman. His caption game is unmatched. His willingness to press a button most artists would talk themselves out of pressing is exactly what makes him, whether you love him or hate him, one of the most economically dangerous voices in this business. He turned a phone into a printing press. He turned that printing press into a weapon. And he pointed the weapon at Rick Ross on the exact week Rick Ross could least afford to be inside its range. Meanwhile, the second-order damage to Rick Ross keeps compounding. Streaming platforms that would have curated set in stone into legacy artist playlists have quietly deprioritized the record. Media outlets that would have run a veteran returns cover story have shelved it. Podcast bookings that were lined up for the album cycle are getting rescheduled. In a normal week, those would be small operational decisions. In a week when 50 Cent is broadcasting the failure hour by hour, every one of those small decisions becomes a public signal that the industry itself is backing away from the release. And once the industry backs away, retail follows. And once retail follows, the streaming algorithm stops carrying the record into new listener funnels. It is a downward spiral, and 50 Cent, from the safety of his own phone, is helping tighten the drain. He is not doing all the damage. He is just making sure the world sees every layer of it as it happens. The Fat Joe podcast moment from earlier this year, the Joe and Jada session where Rick Ross tried to jump in on Fat Joe's line about washed rappers with a threat about swinging $1 million ring at 50 Cent, keeps replaying in the context of this week and getting more painful with every rewatch. On that podcast, Rick Ross was the aggressor. He was the one bringing 50 Cent's name into a conversation 50 Cent had not entered. Fat Joe even tried to redirect him. Rick Ross would not let it go. And now, months later, that clip plays like a man volunteering himself for a fight he was not ready for. Every insult Rick Ross has ever hurled at 50 Cent on a podcast, on a track, in a green room clip, is now a chip on 50 Cent's side of the table. And 50 Cent has been counting them. He does not forget. He archives. Rick Ross loyalists are pushing back. Loudly. They will point out that Rick Ross built Maybach music, developed artists, delivered a decade plus of quotables, and gave hip-hop entire albums that still hold up. All of that is true. None of it is in dispute. But loyalty does not move first-week units in 2026. Loyalty does not override a streaming graph. Loyalty does not stop a 50 Cent Instagram siege from becoming the dominant story about your release week. And the Rick Ross defenders arguing that this is 50 Cent punching a man who is already down are, painfully, making 50 Cent's point for him. Because the moment you have to argue that Rick Ross is down, you have already lost the frame. The defense itself becomes the confession. And 50 Cent designed it that way. That is the terrifying part. Every move 50 Cent makes on Instagram is engineered to force Rick Ross allies to defend a position that admits the underlying claim. The claim being, Rick Ross is not the commercial force he used to be. The claim being, Rick Ross' brand has cracked. The claim being, Rick Ross' hype cycle has outrun Rick Ross' hit rate. Once your defenders are conceding that in public, the war is functionally over even if nobody in your camp says the word over out loud. 50 Cent did not need to make Rick Ross look small. He just needed to make Rick Ross friends admit Rick Ross had gotten smaller. And they did. Without realizing they were doing it. There is another layer here that most casual viewers are missing. This is not just about first-week sales. This is about the collapse of a specific kind of rap persona that 50 Cent has been publicly betting against for 15 years. The mob boss aesthetic. The larger-than-life mogul cosplay. The everything I say I own branding. Rick Ross built the definitive version of that persona in the 2000s. Nobody did it better. Nobody has replicated it since. But the audience that bought that persona in the 2000s is now in its 40s, is not the audience the streaming charts follow, and is not the audience 50 Cent is trolling for. 50 Cent is talking to the audience that came up on TikTok clips and Instagram captions. To them, Rick Ross' brand is a museum piece being described in real time by its harshest critic. And they are treating the mockery like it is the exhibit itself. Watch how 50 Cent frames the set in stone failure, and you will notice something else. He almost never insults the music itself. Not seriously. He targets the sales figure. He targets the brand around it. He targets the persona that promised more than the product could deliver. That is deliberate. Insulting the music invites a debate 50 Cent cannot win with everyone. Insulting the sales figure invites a debate 50 Cent cannot lose with anyone. He has spent this entire cycle attacking the one Rick Ross flank Rick Ross cannot defend, and refusing to engage on the flank he could. That is not petty energy. That is engineered attack surface selection. It is what military planners call target discipline. It is what most rappers, in the middle of a beef, forget completely. And here is where the story quietly turns into something bigger than either man. Because if a Rick Ross release cannot clear 26,000 units, and if the culture will not warm up the ground even for a legend of Rick Ross altitude, then every executive at every legacy rap label in this business is spending this week rethinking their release calendar. That is a real, quiet, catastrophic consequence. 50 Cent's siege is accelerating. It is not just Rick Ross the man losing a week. It is Rick Ross the case study being used to redraw a business model. And once a case study is written, it does not go away. It gets cited. Every meeting for the next 12 months where a mid-2000s veteran pitches a comeback record, somebody in the room is going to whisper set in stone and the number 26,000, and the conversation is going to change tone. 50 Cent did not just embarrass Rick Ross. 50 Cent lowered the ceiling for every artist Rick Ross came up with. The comment sections are proving it in real time. Scroll under any 50 Cent post from this week, and you will see the same phrase repeating in dozens of variations. This is what the streaming era does to overhyped bosses. This is what happens when the persona outruns the product. This is Rick Ross' jaw rule moment, and 50 Cent is running the exact same play. That last one is the one Rick Ross camp cannot let take root. Because the jaw rule comparison is a cultural death sentence in hip-hop. It signals not just a bad week, but a permanent commercial demotion. And 50 Cent's followers have already started dropping it into every thread they can reach. He is not planting the seed himself. He does not have to. His audience learned the choreography years ago. Now project this forward. Where does Rick Ross go from here? He has options, real ones. He could release a hard-edged loosie in the next 30 days and shift the narrative back to the music. He could sit for a long-form interview and reframe the week on his own terms. He could reset the rollout cycle entirely and treat Set in Stone as a slow-burn catalog record instead of a chart play. He could lean deeper into Wingstop and the LLC empire and let the music breathe. Any of those is viable. All of those are hard. And every one of them will have to be executed under a shadow that 50 Cent is currently making sure never lifts. Because 50 Cent is not just posting for this week. 50 Cent is posting for the entire recovery arc. He wants to be the caption on every attempted Rick Ross comeback for the next year, and he is planting the flag now. And this is where the story starts to feel bigger than either of them. Because if Rick Ross cannot recover from this week, if 50 Cent's siege genuinely sets a new ceiling on what a Rick Ross release can do, then the ripple effects go past Maybach music. Every veteran rap star from Rick Ross' cohort is going to have to look at Set in Stone's first week and ask a very cold question about their own future release cycles. If Rick Ross could not clear 26,000, who in that generation can? Which legacy rap albums scheduled for the next 18 months just got quietly redesigned in a boardroom this week? Which contracts just got renegotiated? Which tours just got downsized? The Rick Ross flop is not just a Rick Ross story. It is a warning shot fired straight at the mid-2000s rap generation, and 50 Cent, whether by accident or by design, just made himself the messenger. That is what makes this Curtis Jackson week so historically loud. It is not that he dunked on Rick Ross. He has dunked on Rick Ross before. It is that 50 Cent, using nothing but his phone and his timing, transformed one man's rough opening week into a referendum on an entire generation of rap. That is not petty. That is strategic. That is the difference between somebody who beefs and somebody who wages war. 50 Cent wages war. Rick Ross, in 2026, is finding out again what that costs. He is finding out that in the modern culture economy, the price of losing a news cycle is measured not in this week's units, but in the discount every future week gets priced at. There is one more piece of this that most of the mainstream write-ups are missing. 50 Cent does not just win this cycle publicly. He wins it privately too. Every industry executive watching this play out is being reminded, at zero cost to 50 Cent, that 50 Cent is still the most feared communicator in this business. That kind of unspoken reminder pays 50 Cent for years. When a network is deciding which producer to give a lucrative development deal to, they remember weeks like this. When an investor is deciding which entertainment mogul to write a check to, they remember weeks like this. When a young artist is deciding whose orbit to enter, they remember weeks like this. 50 Cent has been converting cultural warfare into private capital longer than most of his peers have understood the exchange rate. He is not just torching Rick Ross. He is refilling his own war chest by doing it. Meanwhile, Rick Ross' team is in a different meeting altogether. That meeting is about damage control. It is about which interviews to cancel, which appearances to reschedule, which sponsorships to renegotiate, which streaming partnerships to renegotiate again, which Wingstop optics to protect. Every one of those calls is a defensive call. Every one of those calls happens with the volume turned low. Every one of those calls costs Rick Ross something. And every one of them is happening because 50 Cent decided to open Instagram at exactly the wrong hour for Rick Ross' entire commercial machine. The historical parallel that keeps coming up in industry conversations this week is Ja Rule around 2003. Not because Rick Ross music is anywhere near that decline. It is not. But because the shape of what 50 Cent is doing to Rick Ross now is the same shape he ran on Ja Rule then. Take a public figure's brand. Attack the credibility layer, not the music layer. Turn every response into fresh material. Get the audience to do the second wave of damage for you. Never let the news cycle rest. It worked in 2003. And unless Rick Ross' team finds a counter no artist has found in the last 20 years, there is no reason to believe it will not work again. 50 Cent knows every step of this dance because he choreographed it. Which brings us to the thing nobody wants to say out loud about Rick Ross' next album cycle. The advance for the next Rick Ross project just got harder to negotiate. The marketing budget for the next Rick Ross project just got harder to justify. The features on the next Rick Ross project just got harder to book. The playlist placements for the next Rick Ross project just got harder to guarantee. None of that will be announced. Executives will not put it in a press release. But every one of those quiet changes is happening in boardrooms this week, and every one of them is being caused, at least in part, by a screenshot 50 Cent posted from a couch. That is a level of influence per keystroke that almost no other artist in this business commands. When the dust settles on all of this, one uncomfortable truth is going to sit above every other take. Rick Ross did not lose this week because 50 Cent posted. Rick Ross lost this week because the numbers were already there for anyone with a phone to see. 50 Cent did not build the flop. 50 Cent broadcast the flop. And in a media environment where broadcasting is more valuable than building, the man with the microphone wins. Right now, in this arena, in this specific window, 50 Cent has the microphone. And he is not passing it back. This is the arena every one of these artists is fighting in today. It is not the studio. It is not the label. It is not even the chart. It is the phone. And 50 Cent has been training for the phone longer than most people in this business have owned one. That is why a first-week number under 26,000 becomes a global news cycle inside 48 hours. That is why a screenshot with a caption outperforms a full label rollout. That is why Rick Ross' silence is not read as strength, it is read as evidence. In this arena, the loudest interpreter wins, and 50 Cent, in 2026, is still the loudest interpreter this genre has ever produced. There is also a conversation happening in the culture right now about whether 50 Cent's approach is fair, whether it is right, whether it crosses lines. Some fans are saying he is punching too hard at a man who has been in the game long enough to deserve some grace. Others are saying grace is the wrong currency and 50 Cent is simply doing what everybody else in this industry is too polite to do, which is tell the truth in public. Both takes have a point, but the takes themselves are secondary to a colder fact. The debate about 50 Cent's tactics keeps 50 Cent at the center of the story. Even the arguments against him amplify him. That is the trap of trying to critique somebody whose entire brand is built around being critiqued. He absorbs the pushback and converts it into more attention. So which side are you on when the noise finally slows down? Are you with 50 Cent, arguing that he simply told the truth and let the receipts do the talking? Are you with Rick Ross, arguing that a decade of work should not be erased by one soft opening in a streaming era nobody prepared these veterans for? Are you looking at both of them and seeing two men fighting an old war on a new battlefield that neither of them fully controls anymore? Drop it in the comments. Say the part everybody else is scared to say. Because this story, the 50 Cent story, the Rick Ross story, the legacy rap and freefall story, is nowhere near it. Nowhere near the final chapter. Nowhere near done. If this one hit that like button, tap subscribe, and turn on notifications because the next chapter of what 50 Cent does to Rick Ross rollout and what Rick Ross finally does back is going to break before the week is out, and you are going to want to be in the room when it drops. We are watching a legacy get rewritten in real time. Stay locked in. The next post from Curtis Jackson could be the one that ends it, or the one that finally makes Rick Ross open his mouth. Whichever way it breaks, one thing is certain. Nobody in this game is watching this week and going back to business as usual. Not Rick Ross. Not 50 Cent. Not the labels. Not the algorithm. And not you either if you have been paying attention. See you in the next one.